Section 3: The Power of Awe. Calvin, look at all the stars. The universe just goes out forever and ever. Hobbes, it kind of makes you wonder why man considers himself such a big screaming deal. Chapter 8: Field Studies, Nature, and Higher Order Cognition. A chapter on what happens when you take a group of students, remove Wi-Fi, add a canyon, and wait. Key terms: field studies, courses combining classroom learning with immersive outdoor experience. Attention restoration theory, ART. Natural environments restore depleted directed attention. Soft fascination. Effortless attention engaged by natural stimuli. Cognitive mapping. Mental representation of spatial environments. Wayfinding. The process of navigating through space. Or, response to vastness requiring cognitive adjustment. Flow state. Deep immersion with focused attention and reduced self-consciousness. Prosocial behavior. Actions that benefit others. Experiential learning. Learning through direct experience. Questions to consider while reading. Why does wilderness exposure influence more than just stress and attention? How do field studies differ from traditional classroom learning in measurable ways? What happens to social dynamics when people depend on each other in remote environments? How does navigating without GPS change cognition? Why are awe and reflection considered higher-order psychological effects? Chapter: The Educational Value of Getting Slightly Lost on Purpose. Around the early 2000s, educators at Southern Utah University had a bold idea. Instead of keeping students safely indoors with fluorescent lighting and predictable seating charts, they decided to take them outside. Not just briefly, but for long enough that people began to forget what chairs were for. The structure was deceptively sensible. Start with classroom preparation. Add a concentrated burst of academic instruction. Then remove everyone to the wilderness for camping and backpacking. This created a hybrid experience: part lecture, part expedition, part logistical exercise in figuring out how many granola bars a human actually needs. Students worked on field research, partnered with agencies like the U.S. National Park Service, and conducted studies in places such as Bryce Canyon National Park and Zion National Park. The goal was not just to study environmental psychology, but to live inside it for a while. When the research subjects start having feelings. Originally, these courses were designed to collect data. What instructors did not expect was that the students themselves would begin exhibiting noticeable psychological changes, like an experiment that politely refuses to stay contained. Participants reported increased self-reflection, greater emotional awareness, stronger interpersonal connections, a persistent sense of personal growth. These effects appeared before the literature had fully caught up, which is academic shorthand for we noticed something interesting and then found out later it had a name. Eventually, these observations aligned with established frameworks such as attention restoration and stress reduction. More importantly, they suggested that the wilderness experience itself could function as a legitimate unit of psychological study. Social life, minus the usual accessories. Something unusual happens to social dynamics when you remove convenience, distraction, and most of modern civilization. In wilderness settings, social roles loosen. Cooperation increases. Trust becomes necessary rather than optional. Conversations become less superficial. People rely on each other for navigation, safety, and the critical task of remembering where the snacks are. The result is a kind of accelerated social bonding, often described as peeling away layers of formality until something more direct remains. Shared experiences amplify this effect. Hiking unfamiliar terrain. Solving practical problems together. Sitting around campfires discussing everything from philosophy to whether that noise was definitely not a bear. Research later confirmed what participants already suspected. Shared time in natural environments strengthens group cohesion and prosocial behavior. The importance of place. The landscapes themselves play a starring role. Southern Utah's canyons and deserts provide complexity and novelty, opportunities for exploration, sustained exposure to soft fascination. Unlike urban environments, which demand focused attention, these settings allow the mind to wander productively. Over time, this leads to deeper cognitive and emotional engagement. In short, the environment is not just scenery. It is an active participant in the psychological process. Navigation. The lost art of not being lost. Before GPS became an all-knowing companion, students navigated using topographic maps, landmarks, environmental cues. This was not merely nostalgic suffering. It directly supported research in cognitive mapping, spatial orientation, wayfinding. Participants developed internal representations of space, relying on perception and memory rather than a calm digital voice saying recalculating. The process strengthened spatial cognition in a way that modern navigation rarely requires. Attention, fascination, and the curious case of time. Drawing from the Kaplan's attention restoration theory, natural environments were found to produce fascination and mystery, sensory richness, increased exploratory behavior. These conditions support cognitive recovery. Participants often reported reduced mental fatigue, altered perception of time, heightened awareness, increased emotional responsiveness. Time, in particular, behaves oddly. Hours feel shorter, yet experiences feel fuller, which is an impressive trick considering clocks remain unchanged. Solitude, flow, and the occasional existential realization. Field experiences intentionally included solitude and extended backpacking trips, often lasting 4 to 5 days. These conditions created opportunities for what were once called peak experiences and are now more commonly described as awe-related states. These experiences share features with flow, deep immersion in the present moment, reduced self-consciousness, intense focus, a sense of harmony with surroundings. This is closely related to mindfulness, except achieved without being told to focus on your breathing in a quiet room. Reflection and the social aftermath. After periods of solitude, participants regrouped and shared their experiences. This process led to rapid formation of strong friendships, increased group cohesion, shared emotional understanding. One key insight is that meaningful experiences become more powerful when shared. Awe, in particular, tends to come with a strong urge to tell someone about it, preferably before forgetting how to describe it properly. Challenge, effort, and the suspicious link to growth. Field courses also included optional challenges: rock climbing, rope work, problem-solving tasks. These were designed to push participants slightly beyond comfort without launching them into regret. The outcomes were consistent: increased confidence, greater resilience, improved adaptive coping. It turns out that doing difficult things in remarkable places tends to produce useful psychological outcomes. Human-environment interaction over time. Field discussions also examined historical versus modern land use, changes in environmental management, long-term human impacts. This added context, showing that environments are not static. They are shaped continuously by human decisions, for better or worse. The broader cognitive shift. All of this leads to a broader conclusion. Nature exposure influences more than attention and stress. It affects identity development, perspective and meaning-making, emotional regulation, social connection. These are higher-order cognitive effects, the kind that do not show up neatly on a short quiz, but tend to rearrange how people think about themselves and their surroundings. High-yield exam takeaways. Field studies integrate classroom learning with immersive wilderness experience. Nature exposure produces cognitive, emotional, and social transformation. Group cohesion increases due to shared dependence and reduced distraction. Navigation without GPS strengthens cognitive mapping and wayfinding. Natural environments support attention restoration through fascination and sensory richness. Solitude and extended exposure can produce awe and flow states. Group reflection enhances bonding and prosocial behavior. Challenge-based activities promote personal growth and resilience. Summary and conclusion. Field studies reveal that nature is not simply a backdrop for learning. It is an active force shaping cognition, emotion, and social behavior. By combining structured academic work with immersive wilderness experience, these programs demonstrate that learning can occur at multiple levels simultaneously. Participants do not just understand theories like attention restoration. They experience them. They do not just study social bonding. They depend on it. And they do not just read about awe. They encounter it, usually somewhere between a long hike and an unexpectedly profound conversation. The broader takeaway is straightforward. Extended immersion in natural environments changes how people think, feel, and relate to others. It supports attention, encourages reflection, strengthens relationships, and occasionally causes someone to realize they have been walking in the wrong direction for 20 minutes. Which, in its own way, is also a form of learning. Chapter 9. Thinking, served on the rocks. It's the climb Millie Montana. Key terms: self-efficacy, belief in one's ability to succeed at a task; mastery experience, successfully completing a challenging task, strengthening confidence; experiential learning, learning through direct experience; cognition in the wild, study of cognitive processes in real-world environments; attention restoration, recovery of depleted attentional capacity in natural settings; multitasking, dividing attention across tasks, often reducing performance; physiological measurement, tracking bodily responses such as heart rate or stress indicators. Questions to consider while reading. Why does physical challenge in nature produce psychological growth? How does group-based risk influence bonding and cooperation? What changes when cognition is studied outside the lab? Why does removing technology improve attention? How can wilderness function as a cognitive laboratory? At some point, someone looked at a group of students and thought, you know what would really solidify their understanding of environmental psychology? Falling from a vertical rock face. Rock climbing entered field studies, not as a recreational afterthought, but as a carefully chosen demonstration of how humans respond to challenge, risk, and the unsettling realization that the ground is no longer conveniently beneath them. Participants progressed through increasingly ambitious tasks, planning routes in small groups, beginning with bouldering, which is climbing at a height low enough to remain on speaking terms with gravity, advancing to rope-assisted climbs, attempting routes that initially appeared unreasonable. This produced a remarkably consistent psychological sequence: doubt, attempt, success, immediate re-evaluation of what one is capable of. It is difficult to overstate how persuasive the sequence is. Reading about confidence is helpful. Discovering you can scale a rock you previously judged impossible tends to settle the matter more decisively. Confidence, competence, and the effect of powering the climb. These climbing experiences align neatly with research on self-efficacy. When individuals complete challenging but achievable tasks, they update their internal model of competence. The outcomes are predictable: increased confidence, greater willingness to attempt new challenges, a durable sense of accomplishment. At the same time, the group dynamic shifts. Climbing is rarely a solitary triumph. Participants encourage each other, share strategies, celebrate success collectively. This creates a form of bonding that is less about compromise and more about focused mutual tuning of motion. Outdoor challenge as applied psychology. Rock climbing, in this context, is not just an activity. It is a demonstration of several core principles. Nature-based challenge promotes psychological growth. Mastery contributes to well-being. Shared difficulty strengthens social bonds. In other words, it is both a lesson and an intervention delivered with ropes. From campfire philosophy to structured research. Over time, field studies programs evolved. Early versions leaned heavily on immersive experience, often resembling a thoughtful expedition with academic aspirations. Later iterations became more structured and research-focused, including systematic studies such as soundscape analysis in regions like Grand Staircase. The shift reflects a broader trend, from experience-driven learning to hypothesis-driven field research. Despite this evolution, one idea remained central. The wilderness experience itself became something to measure, analyze, and understand. The radical idea that experience counts as data. A key conceptual shift emerged. Being in nature is a variable in itself. Researchers began treating the wilderness experience as a measurable psychological phenomenon, including emotional responses, cognitive restoration, social bonding, changes in attention and perception, experiences of meaning and awe. This reframes nature from background scenery to active participant in cognition. Enter cognition in the wild. This transition leads directly to the work of David Strayer, who developed a course titled Cognition in the Wild at the University of Utah. The premise is straightforward and slightly subversive. If you want to understand how people think, you should probably observe them somewhere other than a windowless room with a clipboard. The field course, a laboratory without walls. Students in this course travel to southeastern Utah, often in regions like the San Juan River area, where the landscape provides both inspiration and a mild logistical challenge. Activities include camping and hiking, exploring archaeological sites linked to ancestral Puebloan and Anasazi cultures, participating in group discussions. The campfire becomes the central classroom. Campfire discussions tend to produce sustained attention, fewer interruptions, more thoughtful conversation. It turns out that when you remove notifications, people are capable of finishing sentences. Nature is a cognitive filter. A central principle in this work is that natural environments change cognition in measurable ways. Attention becomes more sustained. Distraction decreases. Engagement deepens. A key rule in Strayer's approach is limiting phone use. This is less about nostalgia and more about cognitive efficiency. Digital devices fragment attention, encouraging constant task switching. In contrast, natural environments reduce competing stimuli, support focused thought, allow attentional systems to recover. How a generation discovers social life. As in earlier field studies, strong social effects emerge. Increased group cohesion, informal mentorship, shared responsibility for daily tasks. Cooking, hiking, and navigating together create a functional community. People rely on each other in practical ways, which tends to accelerate trust and group identity. Learning across time, culture, and landscape. Exploration of ancestral Puebloan sites adds another layer. Historical context for human-environment interaction. A sense of your place and time in their vast expanse. Immersive, place-based learning. Integration of cultural and environmental knowledge. This connects present cognition with past human experience, reinforcing the idea that environments shape behavior across generations. Measuring the sun-dried brain. One of the more significant developments in this field is the ability to measure physiological responses outside the lab. Researchers can now track heart rate variability, stress indicators, cognitive performance in real time. This represents a methodological shift from controlled laboratory settings to real-world, high-validity environments. The result is a clearer picture of how the brain and body respond to nature as it is actually experienced. High-yield exam takeaways. Rock climbing demonstrates self-efficacy, mastery, and group bonding under challenge. Field studies evolved from experiential learning to structured research. Wilderness experience is treated as a measurable psychological variable. Nature-based challenges enhance confidence and cohesion. David Strayer studies how natural environments improve attention and reduce distraction. Cognition in the wild uses real environments as cognitive laboratories. Campfire discussions promote sustained attention and deeper learning. Technology and multitasking reduce cognitive performance. Natural environments restore attention and improve functioning. Modern tools allow real-time physiological measurement in the field. Shared wilderness experiences strengthen social bonds. Summary and conclusion. This body of work extends environmental psychology into terrain that is both literal and conceptual. It shows that cognition is not fixed, nor confined to controlled settings. It changes depending on where you are, what you are doing, and whether you are currently attached to a rock face. Rock climbing illustrates how challenge builds confidence and strengthens social ties. Field studies demonstrate that immersive natural environments reshape attention, emotion, and identity. And cognition in the wild pushes the field further, treating the outdoors not as a backdrop, but as an active, measurable influence on the mind. The overarching conclusion is clear. Nature does not merely reduce stress or restore attention. It reorganizes how people think, interact, and understand themselves. Also, it occasionally teaches them that their limits were miscalculated, which is useful information to have before returning to everyday life. Chapter 10: Camping. Because therapy is expensive, the open air, sensory shift,